inevitably progress down the road to develop nuclear weapons. I needed to test that and find out whether or not it was true. Is there a link between nuclear power and nuclear weapons? Can power plants be used to make weapons or contribute to the making of weapons? And would increasing nuclear power to tackle climate change increase the risk of nuclear proliferation? Very big, very important questions. First of all, are the nuclear-armed countries also nuclear powered? Yes, they are. The countries that possess nuclear weapons also use nuclear electricity. There is some sort of link there. Most of those countries are the original countries for developing both nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Okay, are nuclear-powered countries also nuclear-armed? No, they're not. 21 countries have civilian nuclear power generation and no nuclear weapons, and they are spread all over the world in all continents. South Africa, as a matter of fact, actually disarmed. I think they're the only country that has fully disarmed themselves of nuclear weapons, and they did that whilst keeping their nuclear power generation. A lot of nations are pursuing it for the very first time, just nuclear power, no nuclear weapons, including a lot of them in our region. So the notion that we might trigger some sort of arms race in Asia by adopting nuclear power, well, I can tell you, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam are pursuing it for the first time already. China, Japan already use it. It doesn't stand up to reason. Now, would increasing the use of nuclear power lead to climate change specifically, lead to the spread of nuclear weapons? I heard a guy called Tom Lee say something really interesting. It stuck in my head, and then I went to go and look at it myself to see if it was true. The countries that already use nuclear power and nuclear weapons contribute over 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world today from fuel combustion. Ergo, they already have the bomb. Increasing the use of nuclear power in those countries to tackle climate change provides absolutely nil additional risk to proliferation. I hope that's something we can all get our heads around. They are already nuclear armed. They are already using nuclear power. More nuclear power is not going to change that equation. It's only going to improve the climate change issue. If you add those who are already nuclear powered, and this argument of working here is the nuclear power leads to nuclear weapons, you get about another 18% on top of that, and you end up at nearly 80%. You could add a couple more columns there if you like, those that use research reactors. You could add the columns of those that are already well advanced on the road to developing nuclear power for the first time. And pretty much we've got the globe covered. Most of the emissions are already spoken for. So increasing the use of nuclear power here is not going to increase this risk at all. Or if so, very, very marginally. But I still felt that I needed to know, well, can these things be used to make weapons? And I still hadn't got that answer yet. Can a nuclear power plant be used to make weapons? The answer I've got for that is, well, yes they can, but of these means of creating weapons-grade material, number one, a nuclear power plant. Apologies there, we'll get some changes in the software. Number two, a research reactor. And number three, a dedicated facility for doing this. Using a nuclear power plant is the slowest, most expensive, easiest to detect and least clandestine way of doing it to produce the worst quality material for a nuclear weapon. It is easier to use a research reactor to do the same thing, and Australia has had a research reactor for several decades. This has been given very brief treatment, and there are a lot of reasons why those things on the box in the left are true. In a nutshell, because the facility is designed for generating electricity, it is not designed for producing weapons material. So does nuclear power lead to nuclear weapons? I feel that nuclear power is applied globally, and it's going to continue to be applied globally. It does not automatically lead to nuclear armament, otherwise there would be 30 countries with nuclear weapons and not 8. Nuclear power plants are actually very poorly suited to weapon development, and Australia could easily pursue civilian nuclear power generation with no weapons program, as many nations already have. I think non-proliferation is an absolutely worthy and in fact crucial pursuit, but refusing to adopt nuclear power to tackle climate change is contributing very, very little to that. I'm satisfied there, I scratched it from my list. Now I've got on to some of the more, I guess, obtuse ones. That nuclear power produces too much greenhouse gas across the full life cycle. So what we're saying here is that it may look good when you're just thinking about the electricity that you produce, but when you look at the whole spectrum of everything involved in nuclear power generation, there's loads of greenhouse gas everywhere else that means it's not good. Okay, is it a climate change solution when the full life cycle emissions are considered? What are those emissions, and how does it perform compared to other energy sources? I figured those are the questions that I needed answering. So So what I'm talking about in the full life cycle is all this very long string of processes, from mining the material all the way to managing the waste, disposing of the waste and decommissioning the plant. Worth pointing out at this point that this standard of proof is not applied to anything else. It's only nuclear power that we insist on a full life cycle before we make a decision that's a good idea. Anyway, we'll go through the process. Also worth pointing out that it's the only baseload energy generation source where they do actually capture and store and manage the waste that's costed into the price of the electricity. The other sources, they don't have to, they just put it up the cheap. But we'll still do the exercise. Let me just illustrate this issue for you. How bad does the life cycle need to be? This is a graph to show you how clean electricity in various places is from a greenhouse gas point of view. In Victoria, you've got 1,230 grams per kilowatt hour. That 140 on the top is for the mining, processing and transport of the fuel to do that. They call that the full fuel cycle. It's not as big as the full life cycle, it's the full fuel cycle. We keep going down. South Australia does better with better coal, more gas, more wind. The poster child for wind energy in the world, Denmark, does it at about 650 or 550, depending on whose numbers you look at. Tasmania, with all of hydropower, is the best in Australia at 320. And then you have France, sitting there with all this nuclear power at 90. So what this argument is trying to suggest is that the life cycle emissions of nuclear are so bad that it can overcome that amazing advantage that nuclear power clearly has from an emissions point of view. Has it been looked at? Yes, it has. This study reviewed 40 global studies to get an idea of the emissions, and then it undertook a new analysis to say what would it likely be in Australia. What they found is that of those 40 studies, 37 of them came up with somewhere between 0 and 50 for nuclear power. 2 of them came up between 50 and 100, and there was one outlier at 100 to 200. To then look at Australian conditions, they came up with a best estimate of 60 for a light water reactor in Australia, with a range of between 10, very low, and 130, still pretty good. Now, I just sense checked myself there and went to what was, when I read it, I discovered not a very pro-nuclear study. This was released recently. It's got plenty of meritorious discussion in it, but I think some pretty spurious reasons for leaving out nuclear power from its considerations. Anyway, what did they find? The same thing. So on top we have coal, carbon capture and storage. So where I told you earlier that it does the job incompletely, there you can see it illustrated. Next down is nuclear with the lowest estimate, very, very low, very competitive with all those renewables. And the higher end estimate, also still extremely competitive from a life cycle point of view. So I've changed the title of this slide now to what works. We know what works. All of this hand-wringing about cleaning up our energy supplies is unnecessary for climate change. We have the evidence. We know what the solution is if we choose to look at it. The estimate for Australian nuclear power generation we have is 60, lowest on the chart. So the idea that across the full life cycle is not a bad performer, I now have nothing to disrespect for this argument. However, I received a document dated 2011 the other day that was still spruiking this argument. It's out there. It's unfounded, it's spurious. If anything, looking at this issue provides nuclear power with enormous support for implementing it. So that one got double strike through on launch. I then got on to uranium mining, that it's harmful and that it's unsustainable, causes environmental harm that outweighs the benefit. Okay, I had to think, is it harmful and unsustainable enough? Again, coming back to that point of context, to rule out the use of nuclear power. So I thought, well, how does it compare to other types of mining? I do not reject mining outright, or I wouldn't be using a microphone and got. And particularly how does it compare to the impacts of coal? Okay, so here's some examples of non-uranium mining. That's the Latrobe Valley. You can see those grades up the top of the left-hand picture, just to give you some idea of the scale. And if you've never, yeah, I can see people squinting. If you've never been to Latrobe Valley, there's one enormous hole in the ground out there. And there's a picture of it when it flooded, doing some fairly measurable environmental harm. That's a copper mine in Canada that utilised something called submarine tailings disposal. It's a fancy term for sticking a pipe in some water and pumping your mine tailings underwater with no other treatment. It's just a very straightforward form of pollution. That's a nickel